Hello everyone, welcome to Review of the Week. It's your host James, and today I put the question to everyone listening: is taxation theft? Now, this may seem quite an odd statement or a controversial topic possibly, but I think it's definitely one worth having. So this isn't going to be a review of the week as an episode. It's going to be sort of divergent. As I said in the intro, we're going to be going on a few divergents in this series, and this is one of them. So we're going to be looking at the idea of taxation being theft. So I personally do think it is theft, justified in some cases, but mostly not. So I'm going to start with a statement. This is a quote on libertarianism.org. So I'm just gonna sort of open with this. If taxation is theft, it has the effect of raising the standards for justified uses of taxes. When the government plans to spend money on something, support for the arts, a space program, a national retirement program and so on, one should ask, would it be permissible to steal from people in order to run this sort of program? If not, then it is not permissible to tax people in order to run the program, since taxation is theft. Now, what that essentially is saying is, if I am a robber, I walk up to someone on the street, pull out a gun and say, right you, give me all your money, or something like that. Obviously that's theft, because the definition of theft is taking something from somebody else which is rightfully theirs without consent or permission. In a very similar way, it's exactly the same with government. You earn money, or you earn a salary or whatnot. The government says, hand over 20%. If you don't hand over 20%, we'll give you a fine. We'll keep doing that for a few weeks and then you'll get put in prison. It's as simple as that. However, income tax isn't the only type of tax. So I speak just for the UK at the moment because I'm not 100% sure on tax laws elsewhere. But income tax is one of the main ones which we think about when we think of tax. There's other things such as inheritance tax, or corporation tax, or importation tax. So for example, these are all taxes that government take off the value of an item based on what's happening to that item or service or to that business. For example, as I mentioned first, income tax, you earn money, that money is then stolen by the government. Corporation tax, a company might make a profit, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's what they're there for. If it doesn't make a profit, then obviously you can't really be taxed, but as most companies do make profits, you will be taxed on that profit. It's quite high at the UK in the moment. Inheritance and importation tax. Obviously, if you are bringing an item of worth into the country, you'll be taxed, and if you inherit money, you'll be taxed, which I think is absolutely outrageous. So that's what we're going to try and explain this episode. I'm going to back up my ideas, obviously, with evidence and opinion and well-balanced argument. I'm going to try and counter-argument myself to try and be as equal as possible, but I really do think it is theft. So, here's the thing. If we're going to talk about income tax first of all, so if I earn £10 an hour and the government, well actually that's a bad example, if I earn £100,000 a year, I'm over the age of 18, the government is going to take a certain amount of percentage off that. It will be around 40%. So all of a sudden I'm earning £60,000. Right, they're not the exact numbers, but that is obviously just for argument's sake. First of all, my question is, where's that money going? Now, if I was saying, yeah, I'll give 40% of my income to go to the NHS or schools, then it's still theft, but it's justified theft. So, yes, I suppose if I'm using the NHS as healthcare, then obviously I'm going to pay for that service, and the government uses taxes to pay for that service instead of saying, right, you've got this healthcare, now pay for it. So in many ways the NHS isn't free, because a significant amount of taxation goes to it. So they're stealing money from us and then using that money for the NHS. So instead of doing that, and having all the admin side of things, why don't you just make us pay for the NHS? It's exactly the same thing. So, if taxation is theft, does it follow that we must abolish all taxation? I'm not saying abolish taxation. Some thefts might be justified. According to libertarianism.org, and also a well-known philosopher, who I'm going to put a link to in the description, and also this website where I'm getting this information from, if you have to steal a loaf of bread to survive, then you could argue that you're justified in doing so. However, similarly, the government might be justified in taxing if this is necessary to prevent some terrible outcome, according to this website. So what I'm going to say to this is, yes, of course, if you are going to die and you need to steal something to survive, then in some ways it's justified. However, the government, you don't sign a contract, they don't ask for consent. There's no agreement here. You could say there's a social contract in which the government requires taxes and they give you protection, and also they provide schools, road police, whatever. But the thing is, it is usually unjustified. It is wrong to steal without a good reason, obviously. I would say it's wrong to steal, full stop. So, obviously, what does count as a good reason for taxation? So, if I were to steal £1 million from someone, and then I went to go use that £1 million to buy a famous painting, obviously it would be theft, and it would be an unjustified use of theft. An unjustified use of that money which I've stolen. So if the government goes and pays for an art museum, or has some social funding for something which isn't essential, then that is theft. In exactly the same way that it is theft if I stole money from someone, and then use that money to go and buy a painting. You could argue that taxation, outside of an argument like this, so if I'm not stealing it to pay for an art museum, but particularly in the UK, if I was talking about the NHS, you might say taxes should be hired. I know a lot of people who think taxes are too low at the moment. They should be raised to pay for the NHS. Here's a question. Some people might argue that taxation is just redistribution of wealth for the common good, and that wealth is distributed to people who need it more, and those people have a larger access to the NHS, schools, benefits, and whatnot. So this is the problem I have. If someone comes from a working class family or background, and didn't grow up with a great deal of wealth or privileges, then that person goes up to be in a higher paying job within their lifetime. It's a very common story in the UK recently. This has been happening for the past 50 years, in particular, notably in the UK. Then surely the fact that the government is then introducing higher taxes on those people to redistribute it to people with less money is just theft, and using that money to give to other people who have less money. And this is unjustified, because if I stole money from someone in the street, if I was walking down Oxford Street in London and I bumped into a millionaire and stole £1,000 off him, and maybe a coat which was worth £5,000, then I gave that to a homeless person, whatever anyone thinks, that is theft. I don't own that money or that guy's coat, and yet and he owns it. I've taken it off him without consent, and I've just done something with it. It's theft. Why should I consent? I don't pay tax at the moment, obviously because I'm not 18. Why should I pay for someone else to be given more benefits or greater use to the NHS or a school place if I'm not using those things? I haven't used the NHS in years. I haven't had a doctor's appointment in years. I don't take up a state school place. I haven't used the emergency services in my lifetime. So when I start paying taxes, why should I pay for someone else to use that when I haven't bought into the system? It's exactly the same argument. All it is theft, and then it's branded as sort of a liberal, legal, very well thought of welfare to someone else. Now, who am I to say that person is less deserving? Of course, I'm not saying that. But It's exactly the same argument if I say I'm paying taxation and I don't want it to go to a certain person or a certain thing because I don't think it's worthy. I don't have a say in that. Now, you could argue I live in a democracy, and the whole point of living in a democracy is your point of view is given across. I couldn't walk into the House of Parliament and say taxation is theft. I'll probably hopefully get stopped at the gates. But that's the thing. There's no representation in the UK for this argument. So therefore we don't live in a democracy. Because the Conservatives obviously intrinsically believe in low tax, which I think's decent. Labour believe in higher taxes because they're a bunch of nut jobs, and other left-wing parties and slightly authoritarian parties believe in higher taxes because they have some social vendetta to go and steal from the rich and give to the poor, which is all well and good, but we're living in the 21st century. It's outrageous. So to conclude this statement, taxation is theft. Some of it may be justified, but it is still theft. I'm also going to propose this point. In the UK, we've got... This is where I start to get quite annoyed, because at the very basic level in the UK, there's two tax bands. There's the income tax bands of a taxable income, or a basic rate, a higher rate, and then an additional rate. Basic rate, 20%. That's up to £32,000. Higher rate, which is £32,001 to £150,000. It goes up to 40%. And the additional rate is 45% over £150,000. So that all sounds well and good. Oh, but hang on a second. We've got income tax rates, which start with savings rates, basic rates, and then additional rates on dividends on those savings and basic incomes. You've got special rates for trustees' incomes. Oh, and then you've got income tax allowances, which are different between if you have a personal allowance or you're married, or you've got a certain amount of kids, or you have a dividend allowance. And then, you're thinking, that's okay. Oh, hang on a second, we've got national insurance contributions. Fantastic. And then within that, we've got a bunch of, almost hundreds of different separations, which I have no idea what's going on. Oh, but that's only if you want to actually have a normal job, where you're on a salary per year, a pro rata salary, and you're earning, the average wage being 20-something thousand pounds. Now that's okay for a vast majority of people. For the other majority of people who are self-employed, we've got some new tax bands. So if you're making £5,000 a year, which is not enough for me to live on if I lived in a hole in the ground, then we're getting taxed. If I'm any profit you earn on that per week, we're getting taxed even more. So if you want to be self-employed in this country, you're going to get taxed to your teeth. If you want to be normally employed and have no money, you're going to get taxed to your teeth. And then you've got different self-employed rates and thresholds per year depending on what LPO you're on. You've got tax credits, you've got healthcare, you've got emergency taxes, tax-free savings accounts which aren't actually tax-free, and it just goes on and on. It's absolutely outrageous. So if you own your own company, you're a one-man band. I know someone who is a self-employed contractor. They own their own company, and it sounds alright. We're getting taxed 40%, and some of that money's going to help the NHS and whatnot. No, that isn't how it works. So if this person has their company, first of all, corporation tax, brilliant. There goes half your money. If you want to actually then pay yourself from that company, there goes another 20-40% on personal income tax. Now if you want to give some money to your kids, hang on a second, we've got income tax, plus the dividend tax, plus inheritance tax. You have to pay, if you want to, maybe if you have a wife, if this person had a wife and they wanted to pay money from their company, there goes another 20-40%. And it gets to the point where you're paying 3, 4, 5 rounds of tax every time you want to pay yourself monthly or per year, and it's absolutely outrageous. So the government's made it impossible for to be self-employed in this country, and it's impossible to have a normal job. because you can get taxed 45% on that anyway.